excited to be moderating today for the 6th annual Imagine This Women's Film Festival. I myself am alumnus, having screened a short that I made last year called His Name is Neve, that dealt with the gray kind of area of consent. It is, again, my pleasure to be having this conversation. I'm really excited to get to know all of you. Why don't we go around, please, first and introduce ourselves and the films that we're representing. According to my grid, Kara, you're top left, so I'll start with you.
Sure, I'm Cara Consilvio, and I'm the writer and director for Dry, short film Dry.
Awesome. Jessica?
Hello, I'm Jessica. I'm the writer and creator, executive producer of Drama High.
Susan?
Hi, everyone. My name is Susan O'Brien. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the director and producer of the short documentary Resist, the Resistance Revival Chorus.
Naomi?
Hi, I'm Naomi Brady, and I'm the writer-director of the short comedy narrative How to OxyClean a Broken Heart.
Elizabeth?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I am the director and executive producer of the TV pilot Drama High with Jess.
Cherie?
Hello, my name is Cherie Solario, and I'm the writer, director, and producer of Black Girl Blue.
And last but certainly not least, Mel.
Hi, my name is Mel Orpin, and I'm the writer-director of Retribution. Nice to be with you this morning.
Awesome. And if I know some of us have done this, but it might be helpful just for people watching. If you go in the top right corner of your Zoom box and you rename yourself with your film, then that's always wonderful for people so they can look you up. So I am just very curious to hear everyone's inspiration for your films. I know so many people approach filmmaking and telling stories from a different seed and starting place. So I would like to hear kind of what compelled you to make this particular story. Who would like to begin? Great.
So I was talking to my friend who is the co-writer on the film many years ago. She had just had her second baby and she was having trouble producing milk. And so she told me about how she went on Craigslist to find breast milk and how it was she didn't pay for the milk, but she had to sort of go to the person's house and convince them that she was worthy of the breast milk. And it was just sort of, she said, she called it I had to do a dance to convince them to give me breast milk. And so that to me was the inspiration for the short. And then when it was finally time to make the short, I did all this research and really discovered the underground world of breast milk sales online.
That's hilarious. Yeah. And have we all seen each other's films at this point? Some yes, some no? No. Okay. Yeah, what I knew something was up at the outset because of the seeds that you were planting for was this mystery? There were some threads of comedy in there, and the reveal I thought was hilarious. Cool. Who would like to share next?
I can go. So Drama High started out as a project for my web series course because I'm studying an MFA in TV writing and producing at LIU Brooklyn at the moment. And so we were asked to research or watch another an actual web series that already existed and then analyze it. So I chose to do Video Game High School. And then after looking at that, I was like, well, I don't know enough about video games to really do another similar thing. However, I spent an entire lifetime watching Asian dramas. So I was like, why don't we go with that? And so that's kind of how I started building on the tropes and creating the characters in the world of that show.
Awesome. Yeah, you did a great job to lead me at the end to want to see more. I thought it was really great fun. Yeah. Congrats.
Yeah, that's the point. Hopefully people want to watch more.
Yeah. Mel, I know you had your hand up before. Do you want to share next?
Sure. Yeah. So Retribution is actually inspired by my personal experience of being hit by a stolen car. I was working at my dream job and experiencing our very broken justice system. And it was a very disheartening experience to go from being a person who deeply believed in the possibility of justice. I used to think that we had flawed people in our system, but that our system was strong. And after being denied justice from both the criminal and civil justice systems, then I began to look around and better educate myself to realize that we had systemic issues that were creating injustice across many different communities. And so I wanted to tell Retribution as a way, through the eyes of fictional characters, as a way to find an intersectional way to talk about this and hopefully continue to raise awareness through storytelling.
Awesome. I thank you for sharing that. I'm so sorry that happened to you. And it's also amazing when we go through challenges in life. I mean, us as storytellers, right? Like the mission then becomes to put it to good use. And you've done that really beautifully. Also, I happen to know Mo. And so it was like a delightful surprise to see her face on the screen. Small world. Who would like to share next?
So Black Girl Blue was born from my personal experience with mental health and mental illness. After my favorite uncle passed away about 5 years ago, I immediately went into this mode where I can still pursue my dreams. I can still work. I can still do all these other things. But a year later, all those things caught up with me. And so I was depressed and I didn't have interest in things that I was, passionate about before. And so I started thinking about, where does this expectation for me and other women, Black women, to just, push through some of the most difficult moments in our lives. And so I thought it would be nice to talk to other Black women about that experience. And so that's how the film was born.
Awesome. Yeah, I think so often those conversations, are kept mum. Thankfully, I think more and more there's like less stigma around sharing experiences. And it's so, I think, helpful and important for people to see themselves reflected. So I really appreciated that. And it's honestly very universal in that way. And we have two to go, Susan or Naomi, who's next?
I can go next.
Great.
So mine is a dark comedy, and I mainly drew from like it's not directly related to it's not directly inspired by my own life, but I just drew like anecdotes. I asked like my friends, just it's mainly just like a conglomeration of like funny anecdotes from my friends' breakups, and also just specifically my like queer women friends, because I just wanted to portray. I created this the short film as part of a class project during COVID last spring, and we had really severe limitations on intimacy scenes, and I knew that I wanted to portray a story about relationships, so that's why I chose to. I also wanted to portray like a bisexual person, so this is why I chose to do like the long distance breakup, and so I had to work around like not having actual intimacy scenes, but I knew I wanted to portray like a female centric story, so that's why I chose period blood. And yeah,
I thought that dynamic between her and the other roommate was so unexpected and fun. And I do appreciate when I see, bisexual women featured on screen, because I feel like that has been not as explored. And it's helpful once again to like see yourself reflected in that way. Susan.
Yes. So it basically started where I was an audience member and I saw the Resistance Revival Chorus perform for the first time, and I had no idea who they were, but I was so impacted by their song and also just this portrait of all different types of women and non-binary artists coming together and singing on stage and using their voices to hopefully enact change. and to fight against injustice. And so I stalked them and I said, hi, I want to make a film on you. You don't know who I am, but I want to capture this movement that is also a voice amongst so many other movements that are happening right now within this country, with the fight with reproductive rights that we're seeing actually right now. Again, they're doing another really big march on the 2nd, so shameless plug, and Black Lives Matter, and just how the chorus was using their voices and their music to fight and take it to the streets. And that was something that I both wanted to capture and also be a part of, because I felt very similarly to a lot of the members in feeling defeated after the 2016 election and wanting to use my voice. And this was my way of serving that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was very curious if you had sung with them, if that was like your inroads. But it's cool to hear that you just like experienced and was inspired by the work that they're doing.
Yeah. I keep on telling them, I mean, I can sing. So if you need somebody to come in,
yes.
I will
get yourself in there. I mean, it's the least they could do, right? You made a whole movie about their movement. So cool. Yeah, I also was very disheartened. I'm sure most of us were by the 2016 election, and made a film, RV, about the threat to women's reproductive rights as kind of my act of protest. And I think that all of our stories really in a way are an act of protest, right? Because, you know, as female filmmakers, I feel like we're all kind of always on an uphill battle. And I think that the stories that each of us are sharing are specific to the female experience. And, you know, we have a unique way of sharing those narratives with the world. In terms of that, in terms of like speaking to the female experience, I'm curious what you feel like with your particular film, and also I think maybe with subsequent work, like what do you want your audience to walk away with? You know, is there something that you seek to shift in terms of culture or whatever it is, like particular to being a woman in this work?
You can talk.
Yeah.
I think for Drama High, it's like very unashamedly what it is. That makes sense. I think sometimes society demonizes stuff that's very feminine or things that women particularly really like. Not that dramas are only women fans. Like I know there are plenty of men who watch dramas as well, but I think it is very, because it's a romantic comedy, it's a genre that usually is more geared toward women. I think because of that, there's sometimes like a very, people kind of look down on it. And so I think by being able to make this kind of show, what I like about it is like we get to use like the Asian American experience and kind of use that to explore this area, and also kind of show that this is a type of storytelling that we can be good at, and also show that, you know, there's some worth there, that people actually like this stuff for a reason.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that it's an Asian American story. I think it was, I mean, it's so fresh. And again, when I was watching it, I was like, ooh, this is juicy. It's so fun, and a different take, you know, on some typical like tropes in a really delightful way.
I mean, I do know, because it was like part of a class, so I got to see like other people's projects as well, of course. And I thought what was notable about this one is that it's very escapist. Like it's very like, I think in a time that was made, the fact that it was made during COVID, I think is very significant. It allowed people, I think, a little bit of an escapist time, and I'm very proud of that.
Cool.
Cool. I would say in general, just with women and non-binary individuals that are watching this, that see themselves on screen with the different members of the Resistance Revival Chorus, we hope to portray a sense of belonging and understanding and strength, and also shed some light on a different type of resistance. That resistance doesn't have to necessarily be going out into the street, stomping on the pavement, holding, your protest sign in the air, that it can be using music as a form of protest, which is something that has been used within this country for many, many decades, centuries even. And also that there's rest in resistance, which I think is hugely important to reiterate. So hopefully when people are watching this, that they get a sense of community, they get a sense of understanding and belonging, and also understand that using their voice, they can use it in many different ways, and that resist doesn't come in one package.
Yeah, the concept of the joy in the music and that being an act of resistance, I thought was so like such a new idea, at least for me, because you think of protests and you think of all the kind of anger and rage that goes into trying to affect change. And it's like, wow, music is kind of the universal language, and it does elicit so much joy within us. And I mean, that's an extraordinary act of protest and resistance. And thank you. I actually learned a lot from your film in terms of the history of that cross-culturally, which is really fascinating. Yeah.
If I can jump in. So in terms of what I'd like people to take away from Retribution, and as a social justice filmmaker, one, raising awareness, as I mentioned, but two, I want people to see this site, and I hope that it will shake them out of whatever reverie they might still cling to, that we participate in a just system. I think we've had really important conversations in the last several years and further beyond, starting to look at the first point of contact, which is policing. But I think we still lack a sufficient conversation to ask what's next and how the entire system needs to be reformed. We are focused, I think we're rightfully focused on issues of how the police interact with especially communities of color, but the LGBTQ community as well is facing a lot of intolerance, especially gender nonconforming and non-binary individuals. And I was talking to a lot of friends informally to try to see what's the solution here. And what I realized from my education is my friends who were lawyers, none of them were required to take even a single class on diversity and inclusion in law school. It was an elective. And when we do not educate, because here's the thing, I came from a suburban conservative community outside of Philadelphia, and I had not met a single gay person until I got to college. We had a very intolerant community that was not inclusive. I worked very hard as a young person, quite unsuccessfully, to do something about that. And I would have deeply benefited from that as someone who wanted to be an ally for inclusion. And yet it was never something that I ever had to interface with unless it was an elective choice. And I think that there are people who simply need support to move outside of their lived experience, to be more compassionate and empathetic, simply because the place where they're from does not support them to think outside of their paradigm. And I realize we all have to grow as individuals. We have responsibility for that. But I know a lot of people that I've spoken to the last several years who are willing to take those leaps, are willing to educate themselves, but we need the tools. So I think number one, we need to talk about how do we better inform the people who go into our justice system. If lawyers are the people that we rely on to help ensure that we get equal justice for all of our community members at a basic level, then all lawyers should be required to have some level of training to understand how to step outside their own physical body and into the communities that they're there to serve. And then similarly, our court systems should have required diversity and inclusion training so that we can ensure that everyone from the clerk all the way up to the judge is also getting that sort of experiences as well, to make sure that, like in my case, there were so many things said in the courtroom that were so problematic after the DA refused to criminally prosecute the person who admitted to a police officer that they'd stolen a car and caused the accident. We then went to the civil justice system, and as soon as we got to court, it was made about my sexual orientation, and they tried to blame me for everything that had happened. And we were not even allowed to say in court that this person had admitted to stealing the car and hitting me. We couldn't even bring it up. So when you can't even talk about the real facts of the case, when someone's sexual orientation is being allowed to be used against them, and I'm not the only person having this experience of people's identities and the facts of their lives being misused every day, this is just the leverage they chose to wedge the jury away from me and come with an outcome that benefited a very large corporation with a lot of money who wanted to protect itself from having to pay for what they honestly are designed to pay for. So sorry for the long answer, but I do think that what I want is to ask, I hope that the film leaves people asking questions of, holy mackerel, like, what do I need to do to be a part of changing the system?
Yeah, wow. Thank you for that long answer. I think it's interesting because you said, you know, what gives is you thought going into it, it's humans that are flawed, but it's the systems are flawed, but at the same time, humans do create the system, right? So it's a bit of like a chicken and egg scenario. I mean, I think ultimately it comes down to the humans. But what you're saying in terms of like actionable steps is great, right? Like people need to be educated. It's tricky because you go into you start to get into like the human nature and the fear of difference, right? And I think I feel grateful that these conversations are at least starting to happen now. And I think it's immensely frustrating for all involved to be like, okay, let's do something about it. And it feels like everyone just kind of always turns to status quo. But I do see shifts happening. So I'm personally hopeful, and thank you for using your art to kind of continue that work and that conversation. Who is next?
You know, the style of this short is so different than others that I've done in the past. It's really over the top, and it kind of starts as one thing, but you know the music is telling you that this is a comedy, and it's headed in that direction. But the thing that I wanted was like,
sorry, I want to apologize in advance if you can hear a dog barking through my earbuds. She's feeling extra sassy these days. So continue.
But yeah, this idea of shame, like specifically around motherhood, of doing things wrong, or like having this vision of what kind of mother that you'll be, and then your body like can't produce breast milk, or expanding that beyond of like, you know, maybe you can't produce a child, and then beyond that, like maybe you don't want to have a child, and yet this sort of biological imperative, and sort of, you know, I'm at an age like in my early 40s where I've never wanted children, but there is a sense of like, oh, I will be past the possibility of having it. And what does that mean being a woman, and like that weight of that, because you will still have people asking you, you know, and so this sort of just all the things that women have to navigate around having children, or choosing not to have children, or not being able to have children. Like there's just so much in that. And I feel like there's so much shame. And I think people are talking about it more, but for all the women in my life, like it's a complicated subject. So this short was just dipping the toe into that. And I think it's an area that I would like to explore more.
Cool. Yes, please. Anyone else like to share?
So I'll share next. So along with like what Mel mentioned earlier, we want to bring awareness to mental health or mental illness, particularly because the Black community is something that is taboo, just like in a lot of other communities, but it's something that either it doesn't exist or just something that we don't talk about. In addition to that, is to refine the perceptions and depictions of Black women in media or in society. We're typically seen as, angry Black women or women who can, take all these things on and, still quote unquote function. And so the goal is to show a different part of us, is to show us being vulnerable and sharing some of the most intimate, difficult moments of our lives. But then to also let, anyone who's living with a mental illness know that there's hope, that your life isn't over because you're living with a mental illness. It might look different than it did before or than others' lives, but there's hope and there are things and ways for you to, heal and overcome and live a fulfilling life. And so just want people to know it's okay to not be okay. And yeah, those are the main things.
Awesome. What I appreciate about what you did, first of all, the different facets of the experience. I mean, in such a short amount of time, I think you covered a lot of ground, and the film is presented so simply that it's really just about the subjects and their vulnerability that come through. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think I'm the only one left. But yeah, with OxyClean, it's definitely more lighthearted than a lot of these shorts. But I had two main missions when I was making it. The first was just to portray period blood on screen, because as a woman, I never really saw that part of my life represented in television and media, and I think that it's really important. I really believe in like comedy's ability to like normalize and make like difficult or like taboo topics accessible to people in a way that's entertaining, but also I think has like a real impact on the culture of how people like think and have stereotypes about things in society. I was really inspired by Michaela Cole's I Made a Story You. She had a period sex scene, and I think that was the first time I'd ever seen period blood on screen in that way. So I knew that I really wanted to do that. Yeah, I can definitely count on, I think I can definitely like count on my hand the number of times I've seen a tampon like actually being, I haven't seen one actually being inserted, so like I wanted to like really be graphic about that. And then I also just, as a bisexual Asian American, I hadn't really seen myself represented in like rom-coms or comedies, and those are some of my favorite genres. So I just wanted to like, I think that it's really important to make queer stories that revolve around like the coming out process and the difficulties to do with it. But I think it's also really important to represent queer people and bisexuality and pansexuality in a way that doesn't focus entirely on that being the central topic. So I thought it was really important for me to make something that was representative of my real day-to-day life, and have this be just like a blip in the life of this character, that it doesn't revolve around like stereotypical like concepts of like coming out or like religious or cultural acceptance, especially related to being Asian American. And I also just wanted to really represent a diverse cast. So those were my main missions with this story.
Awesome. Yeah, so necessary. Like imagine that, like a queer individual just being a human, right? It's like so novel. So yes, more of that, please. And also it is shocking to me, like how periods are so, it's like the devil or some like crazy evil thing, and like literally half the population menstruates and deals with it. So like, why is it behind closed doors in such a way? So I appreciate that you're, kind of layering in the comedy of it helps people feel more comfortable around these conversations that can be unnecessarily problematic. Any other shares on this question or theme? I'm curious if any of you experience mishaps. I mean, we all do, right? Mishaps during production, how you handled it, and if it ended up helping your film in a way that surprised you. Everyone's production went perfectly. Yeah. There's the big C, the other big C that put a wrench in things.
Yeah, it threw a huge wrench into production. Basically, the first case of COVID in New York happened after we filmed with the Atlanta Resistance Revival Chorus chapter. When I was on the plane back, I literally opened up my phone and it was like the first case of COVID in New York City. And we still had a lot to film. And of course, with our subjects, the whole thing is that they take the streets and they're marching and they're protesting and they're using their voices and they're joining all these movements. And all of a sudden now everybody's inside. And how does that impact the rest of the film? And what ended up happening was Black Lives Matter. The first day of filming again was a Black Lives Matter protest in Washington Square Park that the Resistance Revival Chorus performed at. And it was incredibly impactful and hopeful and chilling and just really, really needed for healing for both, you could tell the audience, everybody who showed up to that rally, and then also the chorus themselves joining together on stage wearing masks. And then it just kind of evolved from there that the end of the story would be told in a different way, and addressing how they're responding to this global pandemic.
Yeah, it was interesting to see in some of the scenes masked singers kind of space, because I was like, oh yeah, because singing in an enclosed space is a big no. And so this is such a wonderful time capsule in a way that's not going to feel dated either, because you have the both scenarios. So that was just like a detail that I appreciated. In addition to, seeing the different groups in different regional locations and how they each put their own personal spin on, the main goal of the organization. Yeah. Any other random things?
Sure, I can talk. So,
Yeah.
So I mean, the list of things that go wrong once you make your plan is always long, right? So, but in terms of the ones that benefited us, I would say that from the very outset, my interest was to center a queer, masculine of center Latinx woman as the main character in our story, because I was really frustrated by the lack of representation. And we have a beautiful, diverse community in the LGBTQ community. And one of the things I want to do as a storyteller is write about all of our lives in an inclusive, respectful way. And so I knew I wanted this character to be Latinx and queer from the outset. And yet I wasn't seeing those characters on screen. So when we went to casting, I have a wonderful casting director, Cara Sullivan, that I was working with. I let her know who we were looking for. And we really struggled to find the right person. I think because so often when Latinx women are portrayed on screen, they are more feminine of center, and that people who present as more masculine of center have been discouraged from being involved in acting. Obviously, there are some notable women who are further along in their careers than someone who's going to be in a thesis film. But we really had to dig deep, and I ended up, it was actually a joy to reach out to my community and just start asking everyone I knew to recommend people. I always like to cast a wide net anyway, but my friend Amber Shear had worked for many years in the theater scene in Los Angeles. And she's like, I actually worked with this wonderful actor many times. Why don't you see if she works for you? And we brought Diana Romo in. She was really intriguing to me. So we were like, okay, we did our callbacks. And that's when I learned about the magic of callbacks as well, and how synergy and the right person, that's where you really learn who you have. So Mo Beatty, who she was a last minute ad by our casting director, and she was not exactly as I'd seen the character. So this was like problem 2, was that the character that I originally wrote for her character was different. And she came in and she gave me something so different from what I've written. I was initially confused. Mo knows this story. I've told her this many times. I was initially confused. I was like, why am I getting like rock and roll chic when I've written a different character than that? But then I was so intrigued that I was like, you know what, let me bring her back and we'll just do that fun chemistry callback thing. And we mixed everyone around and we got Diana and Mo in the room together. And it was lightning, it was fire. It's so amazing to see the pages that I'd written come alive so clearly with these two actors. So what I thought was a problem, which was that we were having difficulty casting what I'd written and I thought that I wanted for the roles for two different reasons for the two female leads, suddenly became a treasure because we really had to I love being open. I love the casting process to explore. And I really discovered something unique. And I gotta tell you, Diana Romo, in my opinion, she's a phenomenal actor. I'm so glad I found her. And I just really hope that this film gives her more opportunities because masculine of center women deserve to see our lives represented on screen, and it too rarely happens.
Yeah, I thought she did a beautiful job in your film. I mean, they both did. And I love that when you have something in mind and then, you know, what ends up happening ends up lifting your initial vision. I've experienced that personally. And I think that's partially why I asked this question, because I'm always so curious, like what can be perceived as like a problem then ends up, I think, working out for the betterment of the story. Any other tales along these lines? Yeah.
Okay, well, our shoot took like 3 days to do the whole thing. And like, I don't know if any of you guys have worked with schools before, but sometimes they can be very tough to work with in the sense there's a lot of bureaucracy and red tape and stuff, even though I went to the school that we were shooting at. And so when we were about to, like a few days before shoot, we realized we hadn't fully secured the school yet. And so we ended up having to make a like executive decision and kind of switch the days of production and like shoot other scenes first before the school stuff. And that was like a huge thank you for like the whole cast and crew for being able to switch their schedules around and like be on top of things and stuff. So that was a really big mishap that happened. But we pulled through.
Indeed.
Yeah, we had an incredible producer, Sandy Chang, who, because Jess was acting in it, so it wasn't necessarily something that Jess could handle. So our producer was calling a million different locations and getting everybody to switch the days. I don't feel like our mishaps were that dire. I've been on other productions where like insane things have happened, like the generator and the car dies and like we're stuck in a ditch and we're like 2 miles away from land. It just happened to me. But one other little interesting thing is that our lav mics died and they just were not working for a lot of our shoot. So we had a great sound designer and sound engineer do extensive ADR.
Wow.
And, I shot this in New York with Jess, but I am based in LA. So we did this sort of system where I was on Zoom being able to hear the ADR and direct remotely, which was kind of an interesting experience. But credit
having Elizabeth on the little screen and being like, do it again like this.
Yeah, credit to the whole team for making it happen during COVID. And also credit to our COVID safety officer who kept us all safe. We tried to keep everything as tiny as possible and it all worked out. So very proud.
Yeah, we like rewrote parts of the script to like get rid of extraneous characters and stuff like that to like get around everything.
Yes. Instead of she enters class in front of a classroom full of people, she goes before class starts. So there's only like 3 people.
All the cool kids show up first, right? You know, they're always the first ones in the classroom, right?
Always the first. Cool. So lastly, because we have just a few minutes left, I'm curious what's next for everybody, either with your film or project-wise.
So for Retribution, we're actually developing it as a television series. So I'm working on the pilot right now and I'm excited to get ready to go out and pitch it.
Awesome. Congrats.
Thanks.
I'm in the final few days of post-production on a feature documentary that so I just submitted it to Slam Dance last night. I just made that deadline, but we are currently meeting with people, potential distributors, and then hoping to have a festival run 21-22.
Best of luck.
Thanks.
So there's currently a community for women to connect surrounding mental wellness and health. And so we meet together and do like meditation on Zoom and things like that. But there's also, I have another short doc or feature length doc idea about really deconstructing the strong Black woman, as well as a couple of narratives that I want to write and produce soon.
Cool. Can't wait to see.
I guess. Oh.
Okay. We're taking Drama High to a couple more festivals. Just you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I guess so. And also, like, in the meantime, we've been continuing to write in the background as well for the other episodes.
Great.
So there's that as well. Like, hoping to be able to continue shooting at some point when it's more safe.
Yep. Awesome.
I'm starting post-production on another half-hour TV pilot, which follows a group of diverse students at a fake Ivy after a huge campus scandal hits them, which I'm really, really excited about. And then I have another short film that I'm taking to a festival that deals with sexual harassment in the entertainment industry. It was actually shot before COVID, so it was like, I don't know, I feel like that kind of discussion kind of died away and now it's coming back again. Now that people are living their lives again. So
yeah,
it still happens. I still experience it. So I'm excited to, keep pushing that story forward.
Cool. Naomi?
Oh, go ahead. Okay, I'll go. I'm actually still I'm going into, this is my senior year of my undergrad film degree at UT Austin. So I'm in pre-production right now of my thesis film, which I'll finish this next spring, and then I just have a few more festivals that I'm going to be showing this one at the remainder of the fall.
Cool. Good luck.
First thing I'm going to do is watch everybody's films after this call. That's number one on the list because you all are incredible and it's been a joy talking to everybody. And then our film is going to a few more festivals and doing the run. And then I've been working with Me Too on their 4-year anniversary campaign that is being launched in a few weeks. So look out for that, and working on a couple of other narrative projects.
Awesome. What a delight to meet. Oh, did I miss something?
I was gonna say that, like, also I'm also continuing to write other pilots and things as well for my program, and one of them I'm thinking about developing to a comic book because I'm really into superheroes as well.
Fun.
So yeah, there's that.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. I'm so excited to have gotten to know all of you, and I love these opportunities because we're all really in this together, right? So I'm really excited to see where each of you takes both your current projects and what's next. Thanks for sharing your stories with me and with our audience. Keep up the great work, and hope to see you offline at some point when it's safe.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks, everyone.